to make the starts and sits for your fantasy championship week, and it's time to reveal some here on NFL Fantasy Live. You can also go to NFL.com/start-sit to see the full list. And we're going to start with our quarterbacks, Mike, and we got a big game coming up from Rain Dakota Prescott. Are we starting him against the Detroit Lions?
I know he hasn't been the Dak that he was in the middle of the season as of late. We're starting him because last I checked, he is playing at home this week, and in his last 5 home games, 28.9 fantasy points per game. The Lions are in the top 5 in passing yards allowed since week 12. They just allowed over 400 to Nick Mullins. Dak is a better quarterback than Nick Mullins. A little bit of a hot take there. And this could be a very high-scoring game with the Cowboys at home, the Lions indoors. You want as much exposure to this game as possible.
What if the whole time Dak Prescott was the indoor cat?
Ooh.
I don't know. The golf troopers out there, perhaps something to consider. Overall, we got Tua Tagovailoa going up against the number 1 defense. We just saw what they did to Brock Purdy. Are you starting Tua against the Ravens?
Dolphin fans, feel free to come for me after this week if it doesn't work out. I think you sit Tua Tagovailoa in this game. Like Patrick said, you were watching on Christmas night with Fantasy Championship on the line. You saw what this Ravens defense did to Brock Purdy. And Tua Tagovailoa has been struggling a bit, at least in fantasy. Less than 13 fantasy points per game since week 12. He last reached 20 in week 8. Plus, Jalen Waddle is likely out. Tyreek Hill is banged up. Raheem Mostert is banged up. None of them practiced today, so that just makes it even harder for Tua to have success. I think if you have another option, you take it and you put him on the bench.
Let's consider one of those options, because maybe if people waited and they went out and got Kyler Murray a few weeks ago, still coming back from the ACL, are we starting him this week?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and start Kyler Murray in this one. He bounced back last week, had over 20 fantasy points for the 3rd time in his last 5 games. Now the Eagles, they are top 2 in passing touchdowns and fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks. The Cardinals are going to need to put up points in this one because their defense is going to give up plenty to Hurts and co. And the Eagles generate pressure up front, which to me means Kyler might just tuck it and run even more than usual.
And we love those rushing yards, and we love points in general. So there's your quarterback to go get if you do make a decision to bench one of the top guys. Let's get to some running backs. We want more for Austin Ekeler. Does Austin Ekeler do more for us in championship week?
Look, if you got this far with Austin Ekeler, I don't know how, but you keep starting him because of the matchup against the Denver Broncos. And I was there in person at SoFi this past weekend. And in the first game with a new coach, 66% of snaps, 18 touches to Austin Ekeler. This is the type of volume we've been wanting all year long. He is getting it again with the new coach. Now he plays the Broncos, who've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game. They are top 8 running back in 3 straight games. Ekeler just a couple weeks ago got them for 21. So I think you start Ekeler and you hope for a little air guitar show on.
Yeah, we got to bring it back. We got to get a whole lot of air guitar this week, Austin. If the football field was 99 yards, we wouldn't even have DeAndre Swift on it, but it's 100. Are we starting him this week?
The GOAT at getting tackled at the 1-yard line, DeAndre Swift. I think you continue to start him, though. You saw what he did last week. He had us in the first half, not going to lie, but he went off in the second half. 20 touches in 2 straight games. Now he gets the Cardinals, who've allowed the most rushing yards to running backs since week 12, the most fantasy points per game on this season. The Eagles will have a lead, and when they have a lead, they use DeAndre Swift to grind out the clock. I tried telling you a couple weeks ago this guy's going to win people championships. I think he comes through this week and wins a whole bunch of you your title.
If you didn't listen a couple weeks ago, listen now. Listen now to Mike. He's telling you this guy's going to win you the game. This guy has not, and the Bears have not done a whole lot at the running back position. But what do we do with Khalil Herbert here in championship?
I know he had a huge game last week. There is no way that you can trust a Bears running back right now. Last week was Khalil Herbert. The week before was Roschon Johnson. The week before was Deontay Foreman. Every week it's just a new running back leading the way for them. And he hit the Cardinals, the best matchup a running back could have last week. Now he gets the Falcons, who've allowed just 1 rushing touchdown all year to a running back, the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the position. So don't chase last week's points. Don't chase that matchup. It's not happening. To borrow from an old segment, it's a trap. Stay away from Khalil Herbert.
I love the throwback there. We got more, including the wide receivers and tight ends coming up later on in the show. But you want more quarterbacks and running backs? Well, we did that. Here we go. They're coming your way right there on your TV screen or your phone or tablet. Shout out to NFL Plus. CJ Stroud, Matthew Stafford, both starts at quarterbacks. Going to put Chandler and Taylor on the bench. Also putting, those guys are both starts. The guys going on the bench, A.J. Dillon, Ford, as well as Gardner Minshew and Trev on the bench. But we're also going to look at some wideouts, starting with Rashee Rice. When the Chiefs are good, he's good. Are the Chiefs going to be good this week?
I said earlier in the show, I think we get a vintage Mahomes week. There's no way I am sitting Rashee Rice, and I have him in a number of championship games this week. He routinely is leading the Chiefs in targets as of late. 9 or more targets in 5 straight games. We know that he brings a safe floor, but we're starting to get even more upside as of late. And speaking of upside, the Bengals have allowed the most passing yards to receivers since week 10. So with a good matchup and all of that volume, must start Rashee Rice this week against the Bengals.
That's a must start for you. Got to do it, or face the consequences, which are losing. Let's go to our next wide receiver here, Stefon Diggs. Mike's got that because he did Diggs over Amari last week. That didn't work. But now we take the knowledge that we have and we make a decision about week 17.
This pains me to say, it hurts me in my heart. Ooh. I think you could potentially sit Stefon Diggs this week. Now, I say potentially. 9.3 fantasy points per game since week 10. He is the wide receiver 51 in that span. December has been his worst statistical month for 3 years in a row now, but he does have a history of success against the Patriots, and at some point, he's going to break out of this slump and remind the world, yeah, I'm Stefon Diggs, so he's not a must-sit. But I've been getting a bunch of questions on Twitter like, hey, I have Stefon Diggs or this other really good wide receiver. If you're in a situation like that, you can get away from Stefon Diggs this week, like Amari Cooper.
Santa, come back. Fix the situation. Stefon, the Bills have hurt Michael F. Florio. The team doing good, but the fantasy situation. He needs both.
They buried me in like 4 leagues last week.
He's got to have both. But he may have to settle for the Bills, getting in the playoffs and making a run. I think he'll be fine with that. T. Higgins did a lot for all of you. Does he keep doing it here in week 17?
Yes, he does. And look, I told a whole bunch of you to start T. Higgins last week, had him as a start, and unfortunately my opponents listened because he bounced me in 3 leagues last week, but we are rolling with him again. Jake Browning has been averaging over 320 passing yards per game the last month, and Higgins is going to get all of the volume once again if Jamar Chase is out, and I think this will be a game where the Bengals have to put up some points if Mahomes and the Chiefs look like Mahomes and the Chiefs, and if that is the case, a bunch of volume on a team where they're averaging over 300 passing yards per game, you got to get him in your lineup.
Yeah, maybe that game goes back and forth too. We get a lot of fantasy points for all parties involved. Let's get to some tight ends, and we'll start with Isaiah Likely, who had a massive stiff arm in Santa Clara. Are we keeping rolling with Isaiah Likely?
Yeah, we are. I needed 6 points out of him to make a championship last week. He made me sweat till like the 4th quarter. But in 4 games without Mark Andrews, 13.5 fantasy points per game, at least 8 in every game. Twice has gone over 18. So for a tight end, that is a very safe floor and a high ceiling. He actually leads the Ravens in receiving yards since week 12. He is becoming Lamar Jackson's go-to guy in the red zone. And again, this could be a game if Miami's offense comes to play where the Ravens have to throw the ball and put up points, which means probably even more volume going to their tight end one.
All right, so that's the answer there. You're still starting Isaiah Likely in this hot stretch. Let's go to a Buffalo Bill. Mike, are we starting Dalton Kincaid? Is this no? What?
Another Bill that helped get me eliminated last week. I think, unfortunately, you could sit Dalton Kincaid this week. Plenty of reasons to get excited for next year and beyond. But in week 17, you could get away less than 2 fantasy points in his last 2 games combined. Since Dawson Knox returned in the last 3 games, he has not reached 10 fantasy points in those 3 games combined. In this season, he averages less than 5 fantasy points per game when Dawson Knox is on the field, and the Patriots have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points to tight ends. So unless you're kind of desperate like I am in one league, I think you can get away from Kincaid this week.
All right, let's go to another rookie tight end who was great. But then last week, if you needed him in the playoffs, I don't know. If they survived that, what do they do with Sam Laporta this week?
Hopefully you survived, because I am starting Sam Laporta. We keep saying this could be a score fest in this one. His last 4 games, under 5-2, over 28-2. Yeah, that's pretty boomer bust. But if this game is as much of a score fest as we all think it is, there's far too much upside to get away from Sam Laporta. Before the year, I was calling this guy a potential league winner. For much of the year, he looked like one. I think this is the week he comes through and wins you all your championships. I'm just saying that too because I have him in a couple of championships.
Yeah, so everybody's got. If you made it this far, you probably got some of the best. And you saw it there on the board. 2nd best rookie tight end season in the entire Super Bowl era. More wide receiver tight end starts. Sits. What about the good news? Starts for Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, David Njoku, and Darren Waller gets a start. Sits for Josh Palmer, D. Johnson, as well as Kyle Pitts and Taysom. You're starting Tyreek.